So today we are talking to Anna, and Anna is a retreat leader. She has 6 years of running her business under her belt, and she now is having a baby. And so she's needing to restructure some things to prepare for this new chapter of her life. And we're going to talk to her about some very tactical things that she can do to plan for that, but then also some mindset things that are really important. So I'm really excited for y'all to hear from Anna and to hear a bit about the takeaways that she has.
Yeah, no matter your circumstances, there's probably a likelihood that you'd like to free up some of your time and not have to do every single thing that you're currently doing. There will be something for you in this episode.
Exactly. Baby, vacation, just watching more Netflix, whatever it is. You want to make more time? This is the episode for you. Enjoy.
This is Your Business Hotline, where we take calls and answer questions from real business owners to help them design a business that works for the life they want.
I'm Kate.
And I'm Darrah.
And together we have more than 25 years of business building experience that we are ready to share with you. Want an unusual glimpse behind the curtain of these companies? Let's get into it.
Anna, thank you so much for joining us and for calling in. We'd love if you could start by telling us a little bit about your business and what you're calling for today.
Hey guys, thanks so much for taking my call. The thing that I've been working through in my business is trying to give up a little bit of control. I've been a solo entrepreneur for about 5 or 6 years. I started a international yoga retreat business back in 2016. I've led about 20 retreats since then. But in all cases, I have been doing 100% of the admin, 100% of the leading the retreats on site. And I'm in a situation now where my hand is being forced to give up some control. I am pregnant and due next year. And so I'm in a situation where I need to have other people step in and help. And I'm just kind of working through the difficulties of making sure people are onboarded properly, dealing with customers who are used to it being me. And then also just kind of making sure there's continuity no matter who is leading the different trips.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
Both
Thank
on
you.
your pregnancy as well as your business success. I can only imagine in the COVID era that was extra unique in its set of challenges that it presented to you, which knowing that you got through that successfully also tells me that you have all of the tools and abilities that you're going to need to move through this next chapter as well, equally, if not greater than levels of success.
Yeah, absolutely. So Anna, I'd love to start by kind of figuring out what elements of your business you would like to outsource or delegate. And if you haven't done so thus far, what are some of your maybe concerns besides like maybe clients feel like they want to talk to you versus this person? Do you have any other concerns that are kind of plaguing that decision?
Also, Anna, if I can say, I just feel like Kate is salivating and like chomping at the bit right now because this is her favorite type of conversation. So thanks for giving her that treat today.
Yes, thank you.
You're so welcome, Kate. I'm happy I can make you happy. I would say that the work falls into two camps. There's all of the pre-retreat admin, whether that is updating the website, sending the emails to the guests who are already signed up, tracking down payments, that kind of stuff. I luckily, I've been following you guys for a while and I know I should automate stuff. So a couple of years ago, I automated quite a bit of the admin of the payment follow-up and some of the kind of general FAQ documents people get are sort of automated on the email, which is great.
Great job, Grasshopper.
But there's still a good bit of emailing with customers, responding to inquiries, and just generally kind of running the ins and outs of getting people prepared to go to places like Cambodia, Kenya, Morocco. And so I'm running about 6 to 8 trips a year. So kind of, I have a cadence of how I send pre-retreat communications and hold meetings and that kind of thing. So there's sort of the admin bucket. And then the other bucket is physically someone needs to be there on site. And so that both of those camps has always been me. I have just come off of running the first retreat where I was not there. I had someone go in my place and it all worked out great. But it was it was a safari, and a safari, if you've ever been on one, it's pretty self-contained.
Right.
So there wasn't as many moving pieces as some of the other retreats. And I also think if you ever go on a safari and you don't have a really good time and a once-in-a-lifetime experience, you probably don't have a pulse. So
yeah,
it was kind of a good
personal issue.
Test case. But there are other retreats where it will be a little bit more complicated, a little bit more piecemealed. So there's the admin bucket, and then there's the on-site bucket.
Got it. Admin one side. So for the admin piece, do you feel like if today you went away for 6 months and someone had to step in, you have the tools and resources necessary for them to do what you do? Or do you feel like they would be completely lost and have no idea what the next step is?
I mean, yeah, absolutely no one could step in there. It's not, my process is in my brain and it's not well documented.
Yeah. So yeah, I think in terms of like steps, and I think most people are familiar with doing this at the time you are, where they're like, oh, I physically can't be here because I'll be having a child. What are the things that someone needs to know? And Darrah alluded to it in an episode we recorded earlier. But the easiest way to document those things is to do it while you're doing the next version of it. So if you're planning another retreat right now, what are all the things you're doing? And there are platforms like Tango or Loom that we're happy to talk a little bit more about and explain how to use them. But basically, they'll follow your clicks or can record a screen to see where that email copy is that you need to send, or where to check for things, or how to see what clients have paid, all the things, all the admin that's required for this type of event, someone else could absolutely take over. And then that becomes your standard operating procedure or your SOPs. And so I think that's really the first step in being able to step away, is having your standard operating procedure written down, not only so that someone can do it if you're not there, but also that it is standardized. We know that for this trip, we're not forgetting that these people need, this vaccine form or this traveler profile, or we have to remind them of this, because really, like I say this to my clients all the time, our brains are for thinking, not for remembering. And if we're spending a lot of our brain power trying to remember how processes are working, we're actually doing a disservice to our business and the creative thinking we could be putting towards it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because there's things that I have to do just very rarely, like a couple of times a year. And I have to always remind myself what the process is to get it done on the back end of my website, because I just don't do it very often. And if I just wrote it down one time, that's like a microcosm example of how I can make everything easier on myself or someone else. Because it's like my brain does have to think, now, what did I click after this point?
Right, exactly. And I think something that's so helpful to think about too is when we're talking about bringing in an admin, realizing that they're not only doing the things that we were doing, but they're now giving us time back to do some of those other projects that have been sitting on our to-do list for a really long time. So I'm sure, and just from talking to you in this short time, I know that you have big ideas and you have other things that you might want to be pursuing. And so it's not just like the investment in that for them to be doing the admin work, but what is it allowing you to do because they're stepping in to do that work that you've previously been doing?
Which, Anna, basically another way of reframing that is it's taking that fear that you might be having of trusting someone else with your baby and your darling in this business that you've grown, and saying, I can shift that fear into a place of potential and opportunity.
Yes. And it's always easier to do something when we realize there's a larger yes. Like we're able to say no to admin work when we say like, oh, there's this other bigger thing or a actual physical baby that we need to be tending to that is more important to us than making sure I'm the one that does this admin work.
Right. And some of the admin work, even though it's not standardized on paper, it is very standardized. And in my brain, I know 90 days out, I do this, and 30 days out, I do this. And so it's just a matter of putting pen to paper, or in my case, typing in a Google Doc probably. But I think when I kind of realized, all right, well, we're having a baby, and, I had this idea of, it would be nice if occasionally someone else could go, because I think I ran 16 retreats between June of 2021 and June of 2023. So that was a lot. And some of them I was trying to do back-to-backs, and just physically, it's very exhausting to be the one that is flying all the way to these places, holding space for people. I mean, I love it, but it's also tiring. And so it kind of limits how many retreats I can run, because physically I can't fly to Africa or Asia or Europe more than 6 or 8 times a year anyway. And so it's sort of like, I like your idea of the bigger yes, like I want to have a family. The time is probably now if that's happening. And, that is sort of like a hard reset of, in 10 years, is it going to be more important that I was the one that sent this email, or I was the one at home with my child and my family?
Right. Exactly.
That's a really good point. And there's 2 things I want to toggle on. One is something that Kate talks a lot about, which is this idea of like when you can automate things versus not, and if it would be important. Yeah. So I'd love you to build on that really quickly. Yeah. But before you do, just this idea, I totally lost my train of thought. This is what happens when you're 32 weeks pregnant.
Yeah.
Back to Kate.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of times a fear around automating or outsourcing can be, this might feel sterile or impersonal, or the person receiving this is going to wish it came from me. And so I always do the litmus test of, if my client knew a robot did this, would they be upset? So like, no client's going to be upset if they get an invoice from a robot or they get like a standardized email from a robot. But if they're, calling to have a conversation about, their capabilities in terms of yoga for this retreat and they get a robot, that'll be a problem. And so I think one thing we don't realize is when we allow the things that can be automated to be automated, we actually have more time for the personalization. So your business actually becomes more personalized, more high touch, more hands-on, because the stuff we were previously putting our hands on and spending time on actually doesn't matter in terms of personalization. No one wants to make sure that their invoice is like super personalized to them. It's like, pay the bill and move forward. So anyone that's thinking, well, I don't standardize this, or I, don't put an SOP to this or automate this because I don't want my business to feel like a robot or to feel sterile, it actually allows you to have a more personalized business and to focus on the things that are most important, even in your business, even if it's not a physical baby outside of the business.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I hadn't really thought about that. On some of these emails are pretty standard and it wouldn't really matter who it was coming from. And my vendors, I might have a hotel in Cambodia, and sometimes I deal with the Australian manager or owner of the hotel. Sometimes I deal with a local manager. And it's like, I don't actually care who's answering my emails as long as my questions get answered. So like, that's a good reminder of probably other people feel the same way. If they're getting all the same information, are they really going to care like whose name is at the bottom of the email?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, you're almost holding yourself to standards that you don't expect. And you probably have a certain set of standards for other people, but the ones that you're holding for yourself and your clients in relationship to you are so much higher and in some cases unreasonable. I do now remember, thanks pregnancy brain, what my other question was for you, which is you mentioned like where to put those standard operating procedures, maybe a Google Doc. Do you have any sort of repository or place that you would do that, or any sort of project management tool?
I don't use a specific project management tool. I mean, I have my own very elaborate filing system on my computer, but and then I tend to, when I need to share information on rooming list and information for the guests and stuff, I do all that for each individual retreat on Google Docs, but I don't have anything where it's all sitting in one system. So like if my computer died or I got hit by a bus, like there would be no like, oh, here's the file.
Yeah.
I will not plug any specific project management system. One, because they all have their flaws, if we're being completely honest. And two, because it really doesn't matter which one you use. But one of the things that I think is so important when we're, putting our procedures together is so often you'll spend all this time, effort, energy, putting all these processes together. And then you put it into Google Docs and like it collects dust and no one looks at it. But when you put it in a project management system, it becomes actionable because there's a checkbox next to it and you can duplicate it for each project that you have or each retreat that you have. And so if there's anyone listening that's thinking like, I've written all my SOPs, but no one reads them, well, putting them in a project management system, it makes it a lot more likely that someone will go and look for it. The other thing it allows, and I always think of this because I'm the psycho that wakes up at 3 p.m. and I'm like, was that email sent? Did we do that thing? It allows you to check up on processes from afar. So if you are, like nursing your baby at night and thinking like, did everyone get that email? Did everyone pay? Am I randomly thinking about the person in Cambodia who hasn't emailed me? You can log into your project management system and kind of oversee everything your team is doing rather than having to like hack into their email to do that.
Right. Or having to micromanage them and have them feel like, oh, Anna's breathing down my neck right now. But you're trying to do that quality control and you can have the peace of mind, which is what's so great about these systems and softwares. We often think of them as these like cold, austere things when really they can create so much peace of mind and time freedom for the things that are much better use of ours.
Exactly. So for you to be able to check in on 7 different retreats in 30 minutes instead of having to send 10 different emails, like that saves you a ton of time that is considered admin time or project management time that you're actually getting back. And so I always say, like, when people ask me, like, should I invest in this tool? Should I not? I'm like, is it going to buy you back time, or is it going to take more time away from you because it's taking a long time to either set up or maintain? So like Google Docs, for some people, it actually saves them a lot of time because that's the way they like functioning. For other people, they're clicking down 14 different docs. And if they had it organized in a place that was, a searchable project management system, it'd be much easier. So it is different for everyone, but I implore people to think like, is this taking more energy from me or giving more energy back to me? And that's a great litmus test if you're on the right software.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, also this idea of building and thinking with the end in mind. So now that you know the new goal isn't just to fill retreats and get retreats going and make sure this is a viable business, check. Like you've done that and then some. Now you're in a place where you're saying, how do I grow to this new level because of these forcing functions that now exist? And you're also seeing you've hit your ceiling as far as scalability as a person who is doing literally everything and wearing every hat. So this gives you an opportunity to say, great, I can grow to this place. I can really reassess and reevaluate. And when I'm thinking about the softwares or the people that I'm going to put in place to support this, that you think about what's the vision, not just for the next 6 months or 12 months, but what's the vision for the next couple of years and how does whatever you choose support that?
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll say, because I want to get your feedback on some things that we've shared, is I find most clients of mine are hesitant about outsourcing the client-facing piece of it. So the person that would be hosting the retreat, because that does feel like something that's like the secret sauce, the magic to this experience. And one thing I'll say, because I recently went on a silent retreat, and the owner I'm friends with, and she had a similar concern of like, I'm co-facilitating with this person. I don't know if people will gravitate towards this person like they did me. And it ended up being almost the exact opposite. Like people had not been exposed to this person previously, and we all fell in love with her and thought she was amazing. And so it's about finding people that either have a magic or a secret sauce that's complementary to yours or that really aligns with your vision. Even if it's not the same, it's kind of like the same flavor or adjacent, and realizing that people will adapt if you have faith in that person and confidence in that person and you articulate that. I think people then become like so much more willing to trust in and, be a willing participant in that person's programming because they kind of have the seal of you or have, operate in the same flavor as you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I like the flavor adjacent because for sure what is different about my retreats is that it's really inclusive. It's not super yoga focused. It's more about community and culture and food and kind of experiencing the place that we're in. I mean, there is yoga offered, but maybe only half the people show up,
Right.
unlike some retreats where it's really the focus. And so, kind of somebody who has enough type A like I do to keep things on track, but knowing that you're in Africa or Asia and you're going to probably bust a tire somewhere and you're going to be behind an hour. I mean, that's just how it works, but, has a little bit of type A, but not too much. And then is also like very warm and inclusive and makes people feel like they belong, even if they don't typically think they would belong on a yoga retreat type trip. And so I'd say that my retreats are for people who think that retreats aren't for them. And so I think luckily the people that I've sort of gotten queued up to do the next couple, because I physically cannot fly to Asia and 6 months pregnant, apparently, according to the doctors.
Silly doctors.
Those people have been on my retreats in the past. I've been kind of trying to get people ready to do this, knowing that at some point it would hopefully be necessary. And so it worked out really well this last time. The guy who I had lead it had been on a couple of really big retreats with me in the past and happened to know like 2/3 of the participants. And so when I said, hey, I'm not going, here's the reason. Also, the person that is going is someone most of you already know and they knew and liked him. And so it was a really easy handoff in that case. And I think that it will be important that it's the right type of personality and right kind of vibe. But as you pointed out, there are people, I mean, I'm happy to admit, I'm sure there are people that will be running these retreats that the guests might think, I like this person better than Anna. And that's fine. I mean,
Yes.
that's not a problem for me. I just want everyone to have an enjoyable time and feel like they got a good value and a good experience.
That's what I want more. I'm like, please like this person more than me. And then then I have a reason to force them into continuing to do this. But no, I think that that's great. And like, clearly you've already demonstrated something that's so important of bringing people into that experience and having you kind of supervise how it's going to go, because it is something you care so much about, and you're not going to throw in just a random person, but you've done this great job of kind of cross-pollinating this person before they are leading it on their own. And that's clearly creating so much buy-in from your community. So you've already done such a great job of doing that clearly.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a big transference of trust that happens both through your determination internally that you can trust this person enough, and then the way that you communicate that to people makes me think of agency owners, for example, where they maybe started off as a 1 or 2 person shop. And as they grow, they've got grandfathered in people and new people who come in the door. And for them, they need to be able to express, hey, here's how the process works. Like, we may have interactions at this certain point, but the person that's going to be taking over your account, or in your case, taking you on this retreat, is so-and-so, and we have the utmost respect and trust in them, and you're going to love them. And setting people up for the expectation that they're going to have a great time and really enjoy and appreciate this person. And for the people that, are brand new, they don't know any other way. So there's no expectation outside of, I want to have a great time. And the more that you overtly and subliminally message that to people, the more that people actually get in alignment with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's definitely the good thing is, if I had needed or wanted to try to do this kind of shift a couple of years ago, the vast majority of people who came on retreats knew me personally. And now the good thing is the business has expanded and people have brought friends who've brought sisters. That there are several retreats next year where I really don't know, those people don't really know me at all. And so for them, it's not really a shift. When they signed up, there was already somebody else scheduled to lead it. So it's just a matter of making sure that on the ground things run in a way that is congruent with the brand. And I think that's the only thing that I kind of still have. I feel like I got over the first hurdle of having someone go on this retreat a week or so ago, but it felt like a retreat that everybody was going to love. I mean, a safari in Kenya and a person leading it that a lot of people already knew. So I think, this was kind of best case scenario. So it was a good rip the Band-Aid off, but I kind of also I haven't really found the right person for an admin role yet. And obviously there will be a time that, around having the baby and right after I'd need the admin help. Is like, how much do you guys worry when you outsource things that it stays on brand, right? Like the way the emails are written or the way somebody's debriefing the group. I mean, because you don't want to be overly prescriptive, but you also don't want to be like, oh, just write what you think is fine, right?
Yeah, for email type of things, those are things that I actually am really protective of from a wording perspective. So I do write them and I'm like, copy, paste, change the dates type of thing. Like I make sure that it's like exactly how I would say it. For things that are, maybe it's a debrief of the actual event and that person's having to do the debrief, I give them a list of questions and I'll say, you can put your certain personality in these things, but these are the key takeaways that really need to be part of it. So emphasizing the things that are most important to you, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah, for the stuff that's more qualitative, like Kate's saying, an example from one of my businesses where I have facilitators lead meetings every 2 weeks for multiple groups. I definitely had some of that apprehension initially around, if I hand this off, are they going to be able to do it in a way that is brand aligned and is values aligned? And so part of that is creating specific guidelines around what is the voice of the brand and what are, the values of the brand and what are things that we never would say or we really gravitate towards saying, because you need to have some of those guidelines and parameters, even if it feels obvious, especially when you're still a small team. But then I love a role play in the sense of, that could sound really weird, in the sense of
just taking that clip.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
Instagram.
That's going to be a viral clip. But in the sense of, how do you go through scenarios and situations where you let the person kind of kick the dust off and try different things and get feedback? And, how do you start putting them in situations where you can give feedback in real time with real customers or clients, or where is their low-hanging fruit where there's not a lot on the line because this person really trusts you, or it's with another teammate, or it's with yourself, where they get to work through anything that might feel a little uncomfortable for them, and you get to build up that confidence as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I also think what you said about kind of hitting the high points of like, this is what matters. Like, I feel like my brand of retreats and travel is very obvious and specific, but that's because I live it and breathe it every day.
Yes.
And I think it'd be very helpful to say, even if people have been on my retreats in the past, which the new leaders have, I think it'd be really, really helpful to just kind of have a hit list of like, this is what Above Yoga Retreats is, and this is what it is not. Like, we are not exclusive. We're not, pushing people to do things they don't want to do. Like, it's just kind of, it's almost like the we're not this is even more important for my brand than what we are. But I think having those things of like, you're going to do the daily debrief or communicate with people in the WhatsApp group, however you do. But these are kind of the guidelines of the tone of voice and the way that we address issues if they come up or that kind of thing, right? And I think that's where it's like, you're not telling them exactly what to say, but you're saying, this is the filter you need to put on how you respond to guests.
Yeah, just like you would have colors and marketing guidelines and brand guidelines for your web designer or a copywriter if they came in. You're doing the same thing here. And frankly, what's so cool about this is this sets you up for so many potential options in the longer term of your business. So if you ever decided, I want to sell this business, the fact that you've backed yourself out of the day-to-day, that you have all of these brand parameters, that you have a team of people that have clearly demonstrated, hey, we've got all of our systems and processes in place, whereby people can step in and adopt this, and the business not only continues but grows, puts you in a position to have so much freedom and flexibility to decide how you want to continue to grow the business.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's still very scary. It's still me not being involved in everything is in its infancy, but it's a good reminder. I mean, you used the agency analogy earlier, and I worked in a marketing agency for years, and it was a lot of events and hospitality, which is why I think I'm so good at what I do now. But it was in those environments, we would be planning events, and then obviously I'd be sending people to run them. And I would manage teams of 5, 6, 7 people. And there were people who I really trusted and I would have jumped through the fire with. And, they would go and run it, and it wouldn't have been the exact same way I did. But it always worked out well. I always got positive feedback from them. It's just reminding myself that is possible, and that even though this business is my baby right now, and obviously I cared about my client work and my agency, it wasn't my company. So it's a little bit harder of a hurdle for me to jump, but I don't really have a choice, which is probably good.
Exactly.
I think one more thing to note on the admin piece, because we're talking a lot about like the brand voice as it relates to maybe some client-facing things, but that's just as important with an admin. I think a lot of times we have a tendency to think like an admin is just like a standardized, like typical role, when really like there are some admin who are really proficient in social media, some that are really great at copywriting, some that are really great at just executing things at the right time on the right days and making sure the trains are on the tracks. And so I think those important things in admin are just as important to jot down when you're creating that job description. So I encourage people to like write down a list of all the tasks they're doing, see what they could put on their admin's plate. And then when you're having those conversations, talk about those expectations and say like, hey, I don't want you to just schedule this. I want you to check in with these people. And I want you to make sure that we're sending, gifts to folks that sign up for an additional retreat or whatever those things are. I think it's so tempting to say, well, like maybe an admin should know what to do or they should know how to handle this, but maybe we have a certain level of professionalism or inclusivity or whatever those things are that our admin also needs to know, because even though it's something that can be standardized and maybe can be sent out and doesn't need us specifically to do it, it should still be of the same flavor and tone that we would. And some admins, I think, are better at that than others. So that I think that's also something to vet for on the side that's not client facing.
Well, and one more thing, Anna, to keep in mind is that people put so much pressure on hiring the right person and getting it right. Professional recruiters only get it right 50% of the time. So to know that while you have an actual clock and a time frame by which you need this to happen, that it's typically going to be a situation where not everyone you bring in is going to be an A+ out of the gate. Some will be trainable and malleable. Others will be maybe a short-term fit and not a long-term. Some won't be a fit at all. And that's okay, and that you can bounce back from that and learn from it. And that the more clear you can be about your expectations and your needs, and that you can talk about that through an application and interview process, and ideally do any sort of test projects or see this person in action before you make a long-term commitment. I mean, Kate has this policy where, every 6 months with everyone on your team, no matter how long they've been there or what their role is, you have a meeting to reassess, okay, how are things going? Where are we going? Do we both want to continue? So it doesn't become this elephant in the room around, oh no, we have to have this big conversation about these things. It's just a part of the process. But to keep in mind, like every type of role I've ever hired for on like a personal side and the home side and in my businesses, I have just learned that I get better at hiring for each role the more that I've done it, and that I can't get down on myself when I hire someone that wasn't a great fit because I got, too distracted by one specific skill set or one grand idea that they told me that they'd bring to the table that may or may not have been true. So give yourself some grace around that too.
Yeah, like the first person may not be the right person. And I think it's interesting because I hadn't really thought about making a full-blown job description, because in my mind, this admin work is something that I would hire someone to do for a temporary period of time. But the honest truth is, to all of your points earlier, it probably makes sense that some of this admin work that truly is kind of cut and paste type work, because I've already done all the hard work years ago, that there's really no reason potentially that I wouldn't just have someone do most of that moving forward. And so, have maybe formalizing it with more of a job description application. And like Kate, this is going to sound crazy, but my social media stuff I do myself. And because I come from a marketing background, it's very like natural, and I don't really have a schedule around it. I just kind of post, and it comes very natural to me, and it doesn't seem like work. And so it honestly had not crossed my mind of like, someone needs to be doing my social, and this kind of black hole time of giving birth and, postpartum, because otherwise there will be nothing probably. It's like that didn't even occur to me as something to talk to the admin about. So that's a good reminder.
I'm so glad. And one thing that, I share in my program, Business Meets Baby, with a lot of expecting moms, it's like, there are things that you hopefully want to take back on when you come back from maternity leave, but you never know what the situation is going to be. I have a client recently who her twins ended up in the NICU, and she was there for like 90 days. And so, in that scenario, we would have loved for her to get back to social media quicker. We would have loved for her to get back to client calls more quickly, but that was not the case. She couldn't do it. And so I would rather people over prepare and say like, I'm going to anticipate that this person is going to run my entire business as if I was like in a country that didn't have Wi-Fi, and see what happens. Because then if I come back earlier, great, which I did. I thought I would want to take off much longer than I did, and I didn't. But having the resources there for them to run your business as if you won't come back is so much better than feeling like, oh my gosh, this thing's happened. I'm panicked or concerned about this thing. And also I didn't consider XYZ.
Yeah, because you think, oh, well, 3 months after I'll be fine to jump back in and do things.
Right.
And in reality, there's no way to know that.
Right.
So.
The other thing that can protect against, like, let's say you hire the wrong person, and I'm a recovering people pleaser, so I have a hard time firing people or letting people know that it's not going to work out. I give people test projects quite a bit before I hire them to make sure that they have the skill set needed. And then the expectation is that the test project sees if we're a good fit. So by default, there's going to be a decision, and they kind of have the expectation that it might not work out, which I think is helpful. And the 60-day thing I think is so helpful, of like checking in every 60 days and saying like, is this still working? Should we be doing more? Should we be doing less? That can be really helpful to take care of that piece where you're like, oh, I don't want to bring up the fact that we have to talk, but we need to. It's kind of like a natural conversation that's going to come up anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think just having those kind of periodic touch bases, unfortunately or fortunately, I had to fire people in the corporate world. So I've ripped that Band-Aid off a long time ago, but
Love it.
I can see how it would be a bit harder when you don't have HR on the phone too. So
Exactly. I love it. Well, that's good that you have that skill set, because I'm still working on it. Sadly.
Yeah, it's a tough one. So Anna, we've talked about a lot. I'm curious what your takeaways are and what you're planning to do about them.
Well, it sounds like I need a project management system that isn't just Google Docs and my brain, especially as you pointed out, since pregnancy brain is real. So probably formalizing a system. I've known for a long time I need to make standard operating procedures. I just haven't done it. So forcing my hand to do that for sure. Definitely a reminder that in my mind, the admin's just really responding to emails, but in reality, I have no idea how long I'm going to be away from the business. And so they also need to know how to update the website, because I do all of that myself. They need to know how to do social media. And maybe that's more than one person. Maybe it's not all the same admin, but they need to know how to be able to run the pre-retreat Zoom calls if I need them to, that kind of thing, where I was just sort of picturing, I teach them how to make these handful of documents. I show them how to write the emails, and we're kind of done. But there's so much else that's happening in the business that is just become second nature to me and doesn't feel like work. And I forget that it is work and it takes time, and I will need someone to do all of that. So, and I think too, I really took note of having the conversation and formalizing and standardizing, like, this is what the brand is, this is what it's not, this is the environment that I want fostered on site. Because so much of what I think draws people back is that it is super inclusive and everyone is welcome, and every event, yoga retreats, dinner, everything is optional. There's no like forced fun kind of thing. And so I think just kind of reminding people that, you can tell people everything is optional 100 times. And then if you don't tell people like, hey, just a reminder, if you don't want to come on this excursion, like, you're welcome to stay back. You almost have to, you have to repeat a lot of things a lot of times for people to really feel like it's welcomed for them to skip yoga. It doesn't matter how many times you tell them they can, you have to kind of remind them. So just kind of standardizing, these are the things to remind people the day they arrive. These are the things to go over every single night. And, we would never say X, and like kind of emphasizing we are not this as well.
That was a great wrap up. You held a lot in that 6-month pregnant brain.
Seriously. Recapped it perfectly.
Well, we appreciate you coming today. We look forward to this next chapter unfolding and to seeing how it not only helps and brings more joy to you in your personal life, but I think is going to bring so much value and positive ripple effects in your business.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it too. And I'm also thinking that as I sit in this room full of junk in our new house that needs to be the nursery, that potentially I should outsource someone to come in here and clean all this stuff out and set the nursery up for me too.
We love a good outsource and delegation.
Outsource personally, professionally, all of it.
Oh yeah. Do not get me started on outsourcing the personal life.
Exactly. That's a whole nother podcast episode.
Exactly. Well, Anna,
I probably need to take some tips on that. So we'll have to talk separately on how to outsource more of my life.
Yeah. Hey, honestly, that could be an entirely different episode.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll just say, start somewhere.
Yes, exactly. Start somewhere.
That's probably always how it has to be, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you guys so much for your advice. I really appreciate it. And I am taking notes mentally, but I will write them down because we know that just holding it in your brain is not enough. So
yeah. What was that line, Anna? Your brain is for...
Yeah. Love it.
I love it. Great student. Well, we appreciate you so much. We look forward to these next chapters for you. And thank you for opening up with us and our audience today.
Thanks so much for your help.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
You too.
So we just had a great conversation with Anna. And I think one of the main takeaways that I always think about is that your brain is for thinking, not remembering. So often we take for granted how much we do subconsciously in our business and not realize like, oh, that's all actual effort that it's taking rather than just having the marching orders, and even better, having the marching orders for someone else to execute on.
Mm-hmm. Anna didn't say this explicitly, and I'm not expressing that I think she feels this way, but I think in general, oftentimes when we have a hard time letting go of the control, like she said that she's having, there's this undercurrent message of only I can do it that well, or I'm the best at this, which is absurd. Like certainly we know we can do it well because we have historic evidence to support that. But to think there isn't another person who would be interested in doing this, who could do it just as well, perhaps differently or even better, is insane.
Yeah.
And so to recognize, again, like we talked about shifting that fear into potential, to check ourselves and say, like, where are there places that I'm stuck in these mind loops of fear of what happens or what might be a result of my doing this thing, and saying, okay, well, A, what's the worst case scenario that could happen? And could I handle that? If I don't do it, I'm about to run into a wall anyway. So is the risk worth the reward?
Right.
And what could be the possibilities? Like what could be the great things that happen? And like you said, what can open up for me and my time? And how can I spend that in a way where the ROI, the return on the investment of the energies and the effort spent could be exponential compared to where they are now? Because what got me here. But to get me where I'm going to need to deploy new resources.
Exactly. It's that opportunity cost. It's you doing the admin work is taking time from doing this other thing that's been sitting on your list for potentially years that you want to do that you don't have time for because you don't realize how much of the minutia you're stuck in. So really on the other side of that delegation is so much more exciting stuff that you're going to wish you had done sooner.
Right. It's that short-term sunk cost for so much long-term freedom and potential.
The last thing I want to say on this is that a lot of times when we first start delegating, it's actually harder. It's actually worse. And our brain says, I'm paying more. It's worse. retreat.
Spending
stop.
more time.
Yeah.
I'm still doing it.
Exactly.
Someone's messing up. I'm having to double back.
Right, exactly. So it is a long-term game. It's a long-term investment. You're investing in someone to make things easier exponentially in the long term, but no, in the short term, it almost always is going to feel worse. It's almost always going to feel harder, but keep going and it'll get better.
It's like an anti-bullying campaign. It gets better.
Yeah, it gets better.
Well, thank you all for
Yes.
tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Your Business Hotline. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, rate, review, and share with business owners just like you.